The Multipod podcast brings multi-potentialites together to discover common interests, projects, and offers in a spirit of community and collaboration. Join me, Ted Craig, as I feature guests from around the world here to share their stories and find meaningful connections. Your call to action? Reach out to them after this episode and say hello. Multi-potentialites live unconventional lives by instinct and by design. The Multipod is here to empower you in living life on your terms. Martie McNabb is my guest today, someone whom I think a lot of our viewers and listeners know, and not just virtually, but in person. Martie is great at getting out to some of the big events over the years that bring people together, including Camp Indie and the Everything Conference of 2024. I was fortunate to see her at both, and then we even met up again about 3 weeks after the Everything Conference on her way back to Vermont from a conference she was at in Montreal. I love when things work out like that and people can come and make a detour for a visit, which is something I always try to do too whenever I'm traveling. And connection, community, and sharing is the theme of our conversation today. Martie has developed this wonderful idea of people sharing quick, heartfelt stories based around an item of personal significance, often from a loved one or from a poignant memory. It's called Show and Tell, and Martie uses it to bring people together for anything from team building events to family reunions or break the ice workshops. Now, ideally, it's done in person, but virtually is an option too. And to that end, Show and Tell has a counterpart in Martie's fabulous podcast, Things That Matter. And I know that many of you have made an appearance there, which I'm looking forward, hopefully, myself to doing too. Things That Matter is more of a one-on-one conversation, podcast style, but again, with that focus on sharing the stories and the memories behind an object. You remember in the days before digital, and some of you might, the letters in the mail, printed photographs, pen and a notebook in your pocket, ticket stubs, physical maps, things like that. Show and Tell takes us back to that emphasis on real tactile things that we can hold in our hand, that have a scent and a texture, and that in turn reminds us of a person or a place or an experience. It's a really neat idea. Martie tells us all about it here today, and go check out Things That Matter on YouTube or your favorite podcast app to hear more of these great stories and inspiration. All right, this is the Multipod. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. My name's Ted, and I'm joined by Martie McNabb, who's with me here live I'm in Quebec, and you are not too far away from me across the border in Vermont.
This is true. Yeah. And we actually met up last summer.
Yeah, so
we're that close.
That's a good point. That's why we did. So it's a good point. This is kind of like our Multipod episode number 2.0. The first one was recorded in your wonderful van, your camper travel van, right?
Yep.
Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And we had a great conversation. Everything's great. Oh, I'm going to publish this episode. And then the audio just turned out to be really pretty bad. It was all kind of crackly, and there was a problem with my little device or something. And like, I could have spent a long time kind of repairing it, and then it was like, A, we should probably do it again. B, why don't we do it now that I'm doing this relaunch of the Multipod? There's more structure, we're more intentional, and let's be really focused about having a great conversation, but what we can share with people and the things you have to offer, of course, too. So I'm glad we're doing this now. This is fun.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I loved meeting up with you on my way back from Montreal, on my way back to Vermont. It was a wonderful little, side trip into near your home and your neck of the woods, so to speak. And it even rained. It was raining. It was really beautiful in August. So anyway, but I'm glad to be back here and have you not have to spend so much time trying to edit the poor sound quality.
Yeah, it's easier this way for sure. And we get some video. Yeah.
Yes.
You and I have met a few times in person. That's true. We've met at Camp Indie a few times and at the Everything Conference last year. So you're right up there. One of the people that I've met online. I know online, right? But I've met in person a few times. So that's pretty cool too.
Very, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to talk about, I'm sure, lots of things. Part of the fun of this is that we start off with conversation and we see where we kind of twist and wind and all the rest. But we'll certainly revolve a lot around, I guess, I mean, we can call it business for sure, but also just kind of your project, the passion, which is Things That Matter, and your podcast, Show and Tell, and then the podcast is Things That Matter, right?
Correct.
Yep. And the things that evolve from that. So we'll get into that. I do want to get a little bit more of your backstory, basically, and what kind of grounds you in Vermont, and then tell us a bit about, the other places where you spend your life as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, I am calling in from Vermont right now, in my mom's basement, the finished part of the basement here in Heartland, Vermont, not very far from the New Hampshire border. And so as you mentioned, we connected at Camp Indy. So my introduction to Camp Indy was when I was in my little camper van. I had not really known anything about location independent people, but I had a friend reach out to me from the personal historian field, a colleague in that field. And she said, "Oh, I want to write an article for a location independent magazine." And I'm like, a what? So I went searching and I found Location Indy and I signed up for their email list. And then basically a year later, I was stuck in West Asheville, North Carolina, being for the first 10 weeks of the pandemic.
Okay.
So brings a whole new meaning to BYOB, bring your own bedroom, bring your own bathroom. As you met Brooklyn, bring your own Brooklyn. And during that time, they had opened the membership of Location Indy. And when they did that, I took the opportunity to join. And it led to me meeting you and Camp Indy and all the people and a lot of the people in the at the Everything Conference, multi potentialites, and everything through that time. So, and that was early 2020, and that was also the time that I connected or reconnected with the love of my life from 30 years previously. And so we started redating 5 years ago this month in May, after about 25, 30 years of not seeing each other. And she and my mom-in-law now live out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so right now I split my time between my 88-year-old mom here in Vermont, although she went out to Albuquerque with me this past winter to give it a try. She did not like it. She was too isolated. I think that's the big thing. My mom's a hermit, has been fiercely independent, but as she's aged, she's having a little harder time and feeling vulnerable by being more isolated. She was about 20 minutes away from me and my wife. And she didn't have, familiar things around her. So anyway, she's going to try Salt Lake City next year, live closer to my brother. He's only about 5 minutes away from a senior living community. So she's going to give that a try. But I'm just grateful. Somebody ended up today at the food co-op saying, "Oh, I've been through New Mexico, a little part of it." He said, "It's like I crossed over from Colorado into it." And I thought, I'm in a whole new land. Where have I, landed on the moon or something? It seems that different. And I love the combination, the ability to live in Vermont, close, not far from you, and then also New Mexico, which is so very, very different than this environment. So anyway.
Yeah, I'd love to get down there. I've been to Vermont a few times, but I've never been down kind of southwest the states there. So,
well, you'll have to come visit us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Show and Tales. Let me go back up because a lot of people know you because you have this really interesting twist and angle on the appreciation of things, but of course it's not about the accumulation of things, right? It's about appreciating things that we have, physical objects largely, but you can tell us more. But I mean, it's just the memories and the connections that are triggered and reminded by the things that we have in our life. And Show and Tales has evolved from that. So What keeps you busy, I suppose, when it comes to organizing all that?
Well, so let's see. Can I finish a little bit more about my background?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So 7.5 years ago, I was living in Brooklyn, New York, in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. I had lived there for in the area for probably 25 years in Prospect Heights. And I was a lucky one. I was able to purchase a condo or a co-op in those terms. In New York City, they have co-ops. And so I purchased one, like at this point, it's 30 years ago. And I wanted to have my own business. I was working as a high school biology teacher in New York City public schools. I did that 8.5 years, loved my students, loved teaching, but the administration finally burnt me out. And I had promised myself that, I would leave before that, so I was like, I wasn't burnt out, but I was definitely crispy around the edges. And so I knew I needed to get out. And so I started my first business, or as my accountant would call it, my first hobby, my passion project, helping people organize and basically help people tell a visual narrative from their photos, documents, and memorabilia. Everything they saved and or inherited in their lives that generally, unfortunately, usually gets stuck in a box, a bag, a suitcase, a storage unit, an attic, a basement, just and not accessible. And even in our phones that we've got, thousands, if not, tens of thousands, and we can't find anything. And it's like, to me, it was always a sadness because these are this is the souvenirs of our lives. Like these actually are part of the telling of our lives, our life stories. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, our homes are like our personal museums, our human museums. And, I'm grateful to have gathered people in my life over the last 10 years in the end of life space, the death doulas and grief counselors and everyone, last responders, as they're called, with, because if a lot of people don't end up really thinking that their homes are their museums.
Sure, yeah.
But when somebody passes away and you walk into their home, you're going to be looking at their stuff in a very, very different way.
It's very poignant, yeah.
Right? It has, it's like, why did they keep that thing? Why is that up on the top of the desk? I'm looking at some of the stuff behind you right now. Yeah. Like why? You can see some of the stuff behind me. It's like, why do we keep these things? Why do we hold on to these things? Why do they matter? What stories would they tell about us? Our travels, our loves in our lives, our friendships, our family, our jobs, losing a job. What did that losing the job mean? Like it helped you move on to another thing that you wouldn't know if you hadn't lost that job, but you keep these, ends of relationships. We all carry these things, love letters, you name it. We all carry these things and they're part of our story and they're part of our legacy. And that's how it started, was when I was working with people's archives and creating a visual narrative at the end of the process, which is mostly organizing and curating or editing, as you and I know, and then creating some sort of visual narrative that puts it into a story. And so, needless to say, it was a little hard having people understand what I did. People are like, oh, you digitize things. Oh, you this. Oh, you that. Not really. Oh, you do Snapfish or you whatever, like trying to grab a hold of things that they knew. And I considered myself more of an art director, and or a museum curator.
Okay.
And but how did I market myself? How did I get out in front of people? Because it was a new thing. It was a new concept in a business. Now, thankfully, there's a wonderful organization called the Photo Managers, run by a good friend, Kathy Nelson. We've got 600 professionals that help people with their photo collection, their physical and digital photo collection, a combination of both. So there is now, but 30 years ago when I started, there wasn't anything like that. So I was like, how can I let people know about the work that I do? How can I get out there and get to be known, liked, remembered, trusted?
Yeah.
And so that's when I came up with Show and Tales. Instead of me doing the gathering and the stuff, I invited people to these live events. It was mostly in person, in back rooms of bars and restaurants during off hours, and invited them to bring an object and share its story, just like elementary school show and tell here in the United States,
So when did you start doing the in-person events then, the show and tales?
That was probably, we're at about 12 years ago. It started in the back room of a friend's bar, and it's still running, that bar. I'm grateful. It's called Branded Saloon in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. I was just there a couple of years ago celebrating a niece's birthday. And so they have music in the back. They had a live music venue. And of course, usually live music doesn't start until 9 o'clock at night. And so there was this sweet spot around like 6, 7 o'clock at night. I'd go in for an hour and a half, and just invite people to share their stories.
So how did people respond to that invitation? Did they feel some kind of release maybe by being able to do that?
Yeah. So what I've found is there's not a lot of, I don't know about you and your listeners, but for me, what I've found is there's very few opportunities for people to share their own stories.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, there's TED Talks, there's The Moth, there's, different things on NPR. Hopefully that will still keep going. There's a lot of people who are formally tell their stories or performance parts. Right. But they're very performative. I talk about my events as being story sharing, not storytelling, because storytelling is very performative. It's, there's 18 minutes, you can't like I was told, you can't have a prop. You can't read from something. When I was thinking about doing it, it's like, you can't read from something, you can't have a prop. And I'm like, but I'm going to have to stand up there by myself and just say it off the top of my head. Very hard for me. But it just to see people, even people who are nervous, stand up and hold the object and like show it and then hold on to it as sort of like a prop, like a physical prop, actually, when they got nervous about looking out into the audience of strangers, generally speaking, they would like look at the thing and then look back, be able to calm down and release the story. So I've gotten hundreds of testimonials from people saying that, it was just not therapy, but therapeutic to be able to share these stories. Maybe sometimes like somebody passed away and you have something, maybe your family and friends have heard that story multiple times, but having a space where you're welcome to share a story that people have never heard, it does end up releasing that story and hopefully not making it as heavy. And that's what I've seen. People start off sharing a story that seems very heavy, but by the end of sharing that, when we're talking 3 to 5 minute stories, very short stories.
Okay.
Again, more like show and tell from elementary school. Now I know that show and tell was not in other countries. So if we have multi-pods listening to this from other countries, show and tell might not be something that's familiar. I don't know if it's a standard practice in Canada or not. Okay.
I assume they still do it. My kids seem to do things like that.
Yeah. It's sort of, I joke about it being like Toastmasters for toddlers. It was supposed to help kids get over fear of public speaking and getting in front of people and, all of that. I think, I don't know if the teachers are always the best at helping kids feel comfortable in that setting, because it wasn't necessarily my favorite day. I got nervous. But anyway, I have probably listened to, at this point, easily 1,000 stories of the things that matter, the things that people keep.
Have you documented then some of those stories or thought about doing that?
Yes. So needless to say, I've always run my both businesses or hobbies on a budget, on a shoestring budget. So I've often had people say, oh, have you, gotten this videotaped, or have you gotten this, whatever. And I had wonderful friends who are incredibly generous in terms of coming and videotaping my events. But for taking them out for a beer or buying them some food. But as well, and probably people that are listening, that's the easy part of the experience. The harder part is editing. Yeah. So I never got a chance to edit those live videos. I thankfully am now recording. I do a lot of my events virtually and on Zoom, and I can record them on Zoom. And then I have someone who can clip the stories into small segments that I now use for my mini-sodes, for my Things That Matter with Martie McNabb podcast and YouTube channel.
Okay.
So,
I mean, that's kind of a, I don't know, philosophical paradox. It's like if people speak that story, whatever it may be, of the thing, and it kind of goes out into the universe, right? And it lives in that moment. Is that something that should be reproduced or shared, or people could tell it again, but the experience of it still lives in that moment for those who are there, or I guess those who are watching if it's online. But there's an experiential part of it too. Right? Do you find that people are participatory then? I guess especially in person, but that there's some engagement and questions and back and forth and that kind of thing too?
So what I basically, to manage the event and to also call people's attention to the fact that just because somebody shared a vulnerable story doesn't mean that you have an intimate connection with them. So to be cautious of repeating the stories, or so I don't do a lot of back and forth in terms of asking questions. But one of the things that I do after, inviting people or making people aware of, asking for permission, basically. And of course, I don't reproduce anything that goes out on my podcast without getting approval, permission from the story sharer first, for sure. And so I basically ask my audience the same thing, to please feel free to, walk up to somebody and ask them if you can further a conversation, that you're curious about something. And like I said, the beauty of my events is that pretty much every single one of the in-person ones, people do stay afterwards and continue to make connections. Because I know that that's what you're all about on the multi-pod. Your work, Ted, and mine as well, is about really providing some genuine opportunities to build connections. And that's what we're all about.
Really, I think that's the key word. It's the opportunity. So people can kind of take it from there and, do what they like. And you may have a quick conversation, or it may turn into a long friendship, or whatever it is. But I love providing that opportunity. And that's why I love doing offers and needs and that kind of thing, because it brings people together. And, the magic in it is that organic thing, and you never know what's going to happen. And you hear the stories later about so-and-so started some project because of that event, right? Because of that opportunity. It's a privilege to be in this position, to give people that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Nice. Yeah. There was a one-man show that came out of one of my show and tales. There's been definitely some friendships. And yeah, like that's the beauty. I've gone to the Moth, some of their events, and again, they're wonderful. They're beautiful. I love them, but it's like, and I have friends who've come to my events who are Grand Slam winners. And they can tell the difference, that those are performance-based. They are performance. And when the performance is over, everybody kind of gets up and leaves. Whereas my events, totally the opposite. It's like, even after an hour and a half of story sharing, people stay and exchange phone numbers and cards and chat and have a drink with one another, and have, like you said, the opportunity to to create more deeper connections.
Mm-hmm. So, what's what's the state of things here in 2025? Are you organizing more in-person events? Do you have anything coming up on the calendar you can share, or can people even approach you maybe and say, "Can you organize something for me or for us?"
Yeah, I don't have anything specifically scheduled for my next virtual event.
Okay.
The theme has already been picked, though, and that is Show and Tales, Artivist, Archivists, and Archives. And it's going to be the T-shirt edition. So we have so many people in our community who have the most amazing T-shirts.
All right. I got to show you this. I hope this works, because I might get a little dizzy, but I'm going to spin the camera around if I can. You see on the wall over here.
Yes.
These are all T-shirts. My wife put them together as a quilt. I collected from traveling. Yeah.
Then, now, and forever.
Yeah, that's my high school. I went to a wonderful, beautiful high school, which they unfortunately shut down for not really any good reason. The building still exists. It's a beautiful building, hardwood floors, and it's an artistic school, an art school, and it was it was a very formative place to go. But there was a whole campaign, of course, to keep the school open. It was the second oldest high school in Ontario. It was I forget, 150 years old or something, and they shut it down about 13 years ago, roughly around 2012.
Oh.
So, yeah, anyway, that's where that shirt comes from, because they did a whole campaign,
right.
Been now and forever. So it lives on in our hearts.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's a good story. There's a good example.
Right. Exactly. So this is, yes. So that's the theme. Especially during this time in our country and in the U.S. And so, I haven't done one specifically for T-shirts. And so that I'm hoping to get something booked in June or July.
Okay.
And in terms of hiring me, yes, I, as you know, I was invited to be a special contributor at the Everything Conference. And so I was invited to lead a whole community event called Things That Matter. And it was very well received. I had told Joel that I was testing out a new way of doing things, which I usually do it like all in one group and one person at a time. But we had like 40, 50 people, and I didn't want to do it that way. So I was just like, we have to do it and let people go into their own little groups. So I loved setting the stage and then letting people go into little pods of 3 people and just walk around the room and watch people just sharing and smiling and laughing and some crying, because there's all the emotions that get attached to these things that matter. So So yes, I get hired for basically I call it like warming up your crowd. Like because if we're getting together in person into an in-person event, what's the most important thing? Creating connections and do it at the start. I was grateful to do it early on in the time so people could continue those conversations throughout the work. So yes, I get hired by Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn to do virtual events, show and tales, again, as community building. I just got a job in Albuquerque for a 70th anniversary of the Asbury Methodist Church to again as a community builder. So, yep, I am available for hire.
Good. Okay. And what's the best way for people to find you if they're looking to hire you or find out more about upcoming events?
Yes.
Where should they go?
Yes. So showandtales.com is my website. And I'm, as we all are, as hosts of podcasts, I am looking for podcast guests as well, especially among this fascinating group of multi-potentialites. And so in both cases, either if you're interested in hiring me to do a fundraiser for your group or do team building or do something at a conference, or you want to be a podcast guest, both ways, contact me at martie@showandtales.com. And in the subject line, if you want to be a podcast guest, just say podcast guest and it'll flag me and I'll reach out to you. And then if you want to hire me, say, I'd like to hire you. Show and Tales hire you, and I will reach out to both people to do that. And yes, like I said, I don't have anything scheduled yet for my next virtual event, but I will have it on my website when I do.
Sure. Do you find it's seasonal at all? Like there's times of the year, I don't know, works better or it's easier to bring people together? Does that matter?
I definitely do, as I think you do too. So summers are kind of hard. Generally speaking, we all get very, very busy. So usually my better times of year for virtual events to be, more, have more of a turnout is usually, I would say September, October, November. The holidays are kind of hard. And then also the spring. So are better than summer. So, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good to know. And I do want to touch a bit more on the actual podcast itself. So things that matter, which, well, give us a backstory, I guess, a bit of that. How did you end up starting the podcast? What is it about and who's your audience? What's your objective for that show?
Yeah. So basically, as we've talked about before we jumped on this, it's not that I think things matter. Yes. It's not that I'm like, keep everything, it's the fact that things matter because of the stories that they have to tell. So needless to say, as somebody who lives part-time in Vermont, part-time in Albuquerque, and part-time in a 21-foot Winnebago Travado named Brooklyn, I have to be very thoughtful about the things that I have. And needless to say, a lot of location indie people have the same challenge. But no matter what, for me, it's things have a way of holding like the stories, like in a different way than even photos do, I think. Photos do, but things have that way.
Well, physically, you can hold them.
You can hold them. You can touch them. You can have a sense like, oh, like you wore those T-shirts that you just showed. So it's like when you're gone, your kids might hold and be like, "Dad wore that thing." It's like actually kind of has your essence in it to an extent. They can see you in it. They can visualize it. It's like, why were they important? Hopefully they know the stories, not that it's, there too, that you've shared the stories. So my podcasts, I'm working on doing a 20-minute podcast, 15, 20 minutes is my thing, but sometimes it goes to 30 minutes. And then I do mini podcasts, like I said, that I clip from my live events. I do mini-sodes, but it's basically with the goal, like I've said here, of getting people to, when you Google legacy, you see what's money's in your bank and you see what real estate or property you have. And my thing is, our legacy is so much more than that. And the things that we keep, the things that matter, and the things we leave behind are part of that legacy. So I want people to, it's also kind of slowing down and looking around. That's another aspect of it. So it's mainly a way, what I've found with my podcast, it's very simple. I invite people to come in, show an object, share its story. Then I ask at the end of it, do you have an idea of what you want to have happen with this thing when you're dead and gone? So it's about legacy. And then it's, if they have a business or a project, or they're an artist or whatever, have an opportunity to share that. And what people have said is that it's really interesting because I start with the show and tell. People are like, that's kind of the hook. Like, they have a t-shirt that says that. I want to know more about them. I'm curious to find out more. And it's through the sharing of this little piece of personal history that people get drawn into the story and want to know more. So that's why I have this
that's cool.
Podcast.
So the podcast is kind of like the live events, the in-person and the Zoom events, but on a smaller scale and an individual scale.
Yes, in an individual scale. Absolutely.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd love to come on too myself, one of these days.
Absolutely, without a doubt. I keep on looking over at your like little disco ball. And then of course your your mini disco ball.
This whole thing, this theme, this topic, like it really speaks to me because I'm a nomad at heart. I'm a backpacker. I spent 10 plus years after I finished university just living in different parts of the country, traveling the world. Most of my possessions fit in a backpack. Wow. I had a couple boxes at like my parents' place, but I really did not have much stuff to my name in the world, and I didn't want to. It's so freeing to think about just not having stuff.
Right.
But paradox is that the things that I do have and I do keep are that much more meaningful. Especially when it comes to travel, because that was always been such a passion, and there's such indelible memories from a ticket or a ticket stub, or a map or some little collectible you got from the other side of the world, right?
Yes.
And now of course the last 10 years and I have 2 kids and a house and all that stuff, and I do appreciate having the ability to have more stuff, and especially things that don't fit in a backpack, like my piano is a great example. Or even, as practical things, I can have a nice desktop computer, right? Because I don't have to fit in my backpack, things like that. So there's a paradox there. There's a trade-off, but I do long often for those kind of light and freeing days. The kids can come along too. We did that. We went to Portugal for 3 months 2 years ago now.
Wow.
We all lived out of a backpack for 3 months. So it was great. Yeah, it was exhausting, but it was great.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Such memories, and it's so interesting when you talk about a ticket stub, because I sign up for what are those alerts? Like Google alerts, and there was a recent article about people longing for actual concert tickets.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. I do have there. Well, that's the thing. Well, so we moved here 2 years ago, almost to the day. In our old house, if you saw, I have pictures of it, but I had a similar kind of studio thing here. The wall behind me was much closer to like my back, so you could kind of see more detail what was there. And I wanted to make it as interesting as possible. I remember saying, like, now I had the chance because I had a house and I can unpack all those things that I collected from all the travels. So all the little maps and ticket stubs and things like that. Yeah. And they're all kind of taped up on the wall behind me. And if you zoomed in really close, you could see them. I might still do it here. I'm conscious of like not cluttering things up too much maybe, but they almost deserve their own place. Like, kind of like the t-shirts, maybe if I had like a diorama or something where they're a little more intentional, not just in passing in the background, but I would want to be more intentional about how I display it and talk about it, therefore, as a result. That's the fun part, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things too, is that I've been talking to friends who are downsizing or moving out of the country and can't bring everything. So it's like one of the conversations I'm having on a consistent level is how can we keep the things without keeping the things?
Yes.
Like what are other, like diorama, like you said, intentionally keeping things. But again, it's also the most important is making sure that you share the stories because it's about the stories.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'll leave it. The last thing that comes to mind is all very poignant too, because my wife's grandfather passed away at the beginning of this year. He was in his 90s, and you know, a wonderful full life and all that. And just last week, we were at her parents' house down the road, and we go down their basement, and they had just been cleaning out his old farmhouse because her grandfather lived 2 doors down, right? And so now the weather's nicer and everything, and like, you know, it's time to start cleaning up the old house, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly the process they're going through. They're pulling out old photos and like random stuff like kitchen appliances and dishes and just all kinds of weird and random things. And he's like, why did he keep this? And what's the story behind that? And I mean, he's not there anymore to tell that story, right? But you can kind of guess and piece it together, and everyone has their own stories, interpretations of that thing that would be different from his, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So, we're going through that exact process right now. It's interesting timing to do this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful. It's like, you know, it gives you, you know, different insight into his life.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
You know, so.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, it's been wonderful. I'm glad we got to do this and share what you have to offer. I know this wonderful response to when people get involved and they come on your show and participate in your event. So I really encourage people to reach out to Martie. We'll put, again, all those links and information in our notes, descriptions here. And we'll keep in touch. We'll keep sharing your news. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity, Ted.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks.
Thanks.
I love the difference between performance and sharing, or story sharing, as Martie calls it, the participatory nature. But even then, not in a formal way, with like a presenter then doing a Q&A. In her case, they're basically introducing themselves to whoever is there, and it's over after a few minutes, but that's just the beginning. And that's where the real conversation begins. It reminds me of doing offers and needs, where you have the initial contact and conversation, but that's just the start. It's what happens afterwards where the magic occurs. So thanks again very much to Martie for coming on the Multipod. I'm glad we made it happen at last. And as I often say, things are meant to happen when they happen. So the timing was great. And we look forward to hearing some more of your updates and news as time goes by. And I'm sure seeing some more of our great listeners and viewers go on your show as well. Now, our next episode is coming out on July 1st, and we welcome back Vanessa to the podcast, but this time as a guest. Vanessa has been producing a podcast on surviving being in a cult. Well, not her. This is the person that's the host that she produces it for. The podcast is called Living Cult Free, which is also the name of a parallel nonprofit that supports cult survivors. So the founder and the host of the podcast and the nonprofit is Jarette Bouglion, and she joins the conversation too. Jarette shares her experience of being 18 years in a cult and finally getting out of it, which has led her to helping others escape and recover as well. This is something far more common than you might think, and cults take on all shapes and sizes. It's not just your stereotypical retreat from society, eat and dress the same way, follow the leader kind of stuff. Most cults, in fact, don't realize that they are one, and as you can imagine, that is very subversive. But Jarette has a very succinct and profound way of describing it. A cult, or really any authoritarian system, is based around the concept that they know and understand you better than you know yourself. They, or typically the leader, think you should trust them more than you trust yourself. And once I got that concept, okay, you can really see the difference. That marks the difference between a cult and a genuinely positive, healthy, and empathetic group or an individual. In a cult, the leader is looking out for their own interests, their own gain, typically money and power. In a healthy and supportive system, even if there is a leader, they are helping you on your journey of personal growth and understanding with no personal gain to themselves beyond being happy for you. So it's a key difference. We learn all about it. It's a fascinating topic, and we really just scratched the surface in our conversation. But of course, there is a podcast where you can learn much more, living cult-free. And you'll hear some profound personal stories from Jarette's guests as they come and tell their experience of being in cults and getting out of it. So check out Living Cult-Free, the podcast, and stay tuned for our conversation with Vanessa, myself, and the podcast host, Jarette Bouglion. It's coming up on our next episode. We'll see you then. Thanks to my guests today for sharing their story and what they're up to. You can find all the links and resources that we talked about in the description for this episode. Really don't hesitate to reach out and make that contact. Now you know that they exist, they need to know that you're out there too. A simple email or message can suffice. Or send a more substantial message if there's something that really jumped out for you. The Multipod has a new website, themultipod.com. Here you'll find the archives of the podcast in its previous form, all 111 episodes, a number of bonus episodes, and our Everything Conference mini-series, as well as the new episodes and the resources therein as they are released. Over time, we'll build it out for the best searchability and referencing possible so you can easily find who you're looking for. But a nice spreadsheet will suffice for now. The website also has a new guest application form. Let us know what topic or topics you would like to connect with people about, and we will set up a recording. As a guest, this is your primary task. Come prepared. Like all podcasts, the Multipod will thrive thanks to sharing, reviews, subscribing, and commenting if you're on YouTube, and just generally getting the word out to multi-potentialites that this resource exists. So help us spread our reach and create more opportunities and exposure for everyone. You can reach me at themultipodcast@gmail.com. That's themultipodcast@gmail.com. Or again, the website is simply themultipod.com. New episodes will be out on the 1st and 15th of every month. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today, and we'll see you again soon.